Good morning, everyone. So, in the last session, we discussed about the static related informations. Along with that, we identified the how we can come up with this particular length information. So, basically, here, what is a length here? Length is a variable. So, length is a variable. It is trying to provide the information about the how many the values are available inside this particular integer array it's going to provide. Right? It's like a size here. Getting the point. So size is nothing but how many elements we can store into this particular array that we already identified with the help of this particular length here. So if I'm going to run the same example one more time, now observe carefully what is the output we are getting. The first one is 10, second one is 8, and third one is 4. So this is the information we are getting. Like these are all the length of this particular three arrays. So these are all the three arrays we defined here. Getting the point. But how many elements are inserted here? So in this array, it is inserted 8 elements and the second one is 4. What about this first one? So just we created the size. Just we created the size, only one element we inserted here. Getting the point. So only one element we inserted here. So remaining the 9 elements we are going to get as a zeros here. Karinaban, that we need to understand. So it's like we can call it as a capacity. Capacity and length is different here. So capacity is nothing but how many the values are inserted into this particular array, that we are going to call it as a capacity. Size is nothing but up to how many elements we can store into this particular array, that we are going to call it as a length. Okay. So this is the difference between length and capacity. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to reconstruct the stack class. So what we created in the last example, so this is the stack class we created. It's like this class contain the enumeration, the encapsulation principles here. So because we come up with a variable and we enable only the particular methods here. Okay. So this is very important. We need to understand here. Now, so observe carefully. So how exactly what I'm going to do? This is very important. We need to understand here. Okay, so here what I'm doing here, I come up with two variables here. First one object is creating, second one is index. So index purpose we come up with a variable called TOS here. Now, so what I'm doing here, I'm not going to create this object right now. Getting the point? I'm not creating any object. Just I'm trying to declare this. The whatever the array we are creating here, the int array, just I'm declaring here. So where I'm going to create here, getting the point. So what is this particular stack? So stack is a one constructor we come up here, and here it is a default constructor. Now what I will do, I'm going to make this particular constructor as a parameter. So now you can see size here. This is the size, and now so stck is equals to new int. So here, what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide the size. So now what you understand here, the size we are going to provide dynamically. Whatever the earlier example we used here, so here we come up with the size as a static value that is called 10. But right now what I'm doing here, whenever we are trying to create this particular stack object, we are going to provide the size of this particular int array. Getting the point. So this is important here. So because we are trying to provide the everything as a dynamically. Okay. Now the size we are going to provide dynamically. So once we provide this, the TOS variable, index variable, I'm starting with the same. It's like a -1. And now what I will do, instead of checking this particular 9 here. So 9 we cannot check here because we don't know what is the size we are going to provide. So if it is the 10, we can check here as 9. But if I'm going to provide 20, so how we are going to check this particular 9? So this is wrong here. So if this is wrong, now what we can do? So we need to check with the length here. Getting the point? We need to check the length here. So how we can check the length here? So stck dot length that we already identified in the last example. Length if I'm going to use, so it will give the size here. But the index and size cannot match here. The indexes are going to start with 0. The size is going to start with 1 here. Getting the point? Now what I'm doing here, basically the right side we are checking the size and left side it is the index variable. Getting the point. So here what you need to understand, index variables are going to start with 0 and length, or we can call it as a size. Those variables are going to start with 1, and here it cannot match here. Now what I'm doing here, because the length is a one value is a bigger one. Getting the point. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to make -1. So whenever I'm making -1, what happens internally? So for example, if the length is 10, if I'm going to do the -1, it will become 9 here. It is become 9. Same way, if the length is 50, if I'm going to do the -1, the length become 49. And here 49 equals to the TVS. TVS is nothing but here index variable. So we are checking here. So it's going to match. So like if the values are, the indexes are increased to the 49, the length is going to match to this particular 49 here. Getting the point? So this is important, we need to understand, because indexes are going to start with a 0, the size it's going to start with a 1 here. Because of that I'm doing here length -1. Getting the point? So this is the dynamic condition. So earlier what we did, we come up with a static condition. Getting the point? That is important, we need to understand. So now it is a dynamic condition. And later, so we'll make the stack is full, and later in the L section we are going to use the same insertion query. And so this is the pop method, we are going to use the same. But right now, where we are creating this object. Okay, so I think here only we created the object here. But now if you observe carefully, earlier we come up with a default constructor, but right now what I'm doing is I'm modifying this particular constructor. So first one I'm going to give as a 20, and the second object I'm going to give as a 40. Second object I'm going to give as a 40. But here, so what about this particular condition? Because so these are all the object creation. So internally, the array size is going to created with this particular value. Second one we are giving the size as a 40, and first one we are giving as a 20. But here this loop here, this is also important, because we are trying to inserting multiple values. Getting the point? We are trying to inserting multiple values. But how we can insert here? Because the condition, this particular loop is going to repeat only 10 times, but the sizes are different here. Now what we can do? So let me check this. stck1 dot. So any information we can get it here. Only push or pop here. No other information. Getting the point? No other information we cannot get it. So what we can do? What we can do? So right now we don't have a option to make the condition dynamically here. For this particular loop, we don't have a condition dynamically. So here what I will do, I'm going to make as a this particular size only directly. Okay. So or what we can do, we have a one option here. So here what we can do, we can come up with the one more variable. So here now what I'm doing here, so I'm trying to come up with the one variable called size, and here I'm going to generate the setter method for getter method for this particular size. Now if you observe, so this is the get size method for loading the size, and this is the set size method. Getting the point? Now what I will do, this I will copy here, and here I'm going to paste. Getting the point? So this is very important what we are doing here. Observe carefully inside this particular stack. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to initializing the size here. I'm trying to initializing the size. So now what we can do, if I'm going to use this particular main class, instead of providing the size here, instead of providing this particular static value as a 20, now what we can do? So stck1 dot get size. Getting the point? So here, whatever the size we are going to pass here, where whatever the size here we are going to pass here, the particular size is going to have the condition. Based on this particular condition, this particular loop will repeat. Getting the point? Based on this particular condition, this particular loop is going to repeat here. Now observe, I'm going to copy the same information and here I will paste it. Here I will paste it here. So now observe carefully. If I'm going to run the same example, now, so it is returning 0 to 20. The size we are having 0 to 19, that is become 20, but the values are different here because we are trying to multiply the values here. So because of that, we are getting as the highest value is 38 and the lowest value 0. But now if you calculate this, it's contain only 20 elements here. It contain only 20 elements here. But what we are doing first here? So first we come up with the dynamic size creation, and here we are providing the dynamic condition for inserting and loading an object here. Okay. So any questions here?
Sir, I have one question. Can we go back on the stack class?
Okay.
Can we scroll up it, sir? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, sir. So this line number 10, toss is equal to -1. So is this empty stack or like we are like initializing this value?
See, this is not an empty stack. So basically here what you need to understand, this is an array it's going to create internally. Right. The size here, it is going to contain something like 0 to 20. Okay. So here it's starting with a 0, it is time to ending with a 19. So this is become 20. So why I'm saying this is the 20? Because what we did here inside this particular example, the size we given as a 20. Okay. So whenever the size we given as a 20, this is the diagram is going to create it. So now what we are creating, and here this is the variable, whatever this TOS variable I'm defining here, this variable is going to pointing like this 0, 1, 2, 3 something up to 19. So for this purpose, I'm defining this particular variable initially -1. Whenever the object is created, we are initializing like we are coming with the -1. But if you see, whenever we are trying to insert the data, because the push method only, it's going to insert the data into this particular stack here. So how we are inserting? Because this is an reference of this particular array, and this is pointing as a index location, and this is the original item what we are trying to store. And here if you see, we are using the pre-increment. So initial value how much? -1. Now whenever we are doing the pre-increment, now the value will become 0. Getting the point? So from the 0, the values will insert into this particular stack. Okay. So it's clear? Any questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So any other questions?
Yeah, sir, one more question. So, like, when the stack is overflow, so like when we pop and again it's the same time it's pulling. When we push, same time it's like pop. So in in which stage like we can say it's overflow because is it not pop
See,
stage?
basically, if you observe carefully, what we provided here, so size we provided, and if we are checking the size. So this particular loop cannot repeat more than this particular 20 times. Okay, so 0 to 19. But whenever the value will become 20, it is coming out of this particular loop. So we are not going to insert the outside of this particular size values. So if you are trying to insert something like, if the size is 20, if you give as a 21, if you give as this particular 21, now what happens internally? So this section of code, it's going to match this condition. This condition will match and it will printing this particular message. So observe carefully. See, stack is full. Okay, if you want to understand more, okay, we'll enable the breakpoints and we'll run this example. Okay, so what is the t-base variable here? Inside this we can see it's a -1. Okay, it is a -1. So now we can check the value. So -1 equals to what is we are having. So I'm going to make as a, then watch here. Now here you can see this is the second one. What is the value it is returning? 19. It is returning 19. But here we are having -1. -1 equals to 19. Is it satisfying here? No. So whatever we are making here, it is not going to satisfy. If it is not satisfying here, now what happens internally? It will back to the else section. Okay. So first iteration. And now this is the second one. Third iteration. Fourth iteration. So like how many times it's going to iterate here? Up to the 20 times here. So if you see, so condition is satisfied. How the condition is satisfied? And you can see here inside this particular stack. Now observe carefully how many values we inserted right now. How many values we inserted here? Let me bring little bit bigger. So whatever the size we provided, the size is filled or any values is there to enter the values. So if you see, so it starts with a 0 and it is ended with a 38. The whatever the size we provided, the size is filled here. We don't have a option to insert one more record. Getting the point? Here we don't have an option to insert one more record. But still, now again we are calling this particular push method one more time. One more time we are trying to call. So you can see the item value 40. We are trying to insert the 40 value into this particular the stack, whatever the stack we created. But now what happening internally? We don't have a space here. Whatever the size we created, the size is filled now. Now what we are doing here, so we are checking the condition here. The condition now you can see what is the t-base we are having. What is the t-base we are having? So here you can see 19 we are having. So now what is the size we can what is the index location now? That is called 19. That is called 19. 19 the location is failed. Now we are trying to insert into the 20 location. But now if you see the size here, the size whatever the size we created here, 0 to 19 only. Okay, 0 to 19 is failed here. But still, so one more time we are calling this particular push method to insert the value. But here we don't have a space to insert the whatever the 40 value we are trying to do. But now in this case what we are doing is we are throwing an a, so like it is a message right now here, but in the real time we are going to throw an exceptions here. Okay, but now observe. So the toss we are having 19 and stock dot length. What is the stock dot length? Basically it is a 20 here. Okay, so it is a 20. But now what I'm doing here, I'm making -1. Why I'm making the -1 here? Because length is going to start from the 1. The indexes are starting with a 0. So this is the difference here. To match the both conditions here, the length we need to make in -1 here. So whenever we are making the -1, so it's going to start the indexes locations here. So now the indexes locations are satisfied. You can see So stack dot length dot minus 1, we are getting as a 19. The TOS is 19, and the stack dot length dot minus 1 is also returning 19. So whenever these two conditions are satisfied, here we don't have a space to insert into the value into this particular array here. So then we are throwing in a some message here. The particular whatever the stack we are inserting, the stack is filled here. Okay. So is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's the reason now what we are doing here, we are trying to come up with this particular, instead of making the static value. Basically 21 is a static value. So I don't want to make static value. For example, I'm inserting here 45. Whenever I'm inserting 45 the size, again this particular loop will repeat only 21 times. But here we have a some more space is available in the stack to insert some values here. Right. So instead of doing this, now what we can do, we can come up with a method here, get size method. This particular get size method, what happens internally? It's going to check the condition dynamically only. Based on this particular size here, the loop also will repeat. This particular loop also will repeat based on the size, whatever the size we are giving. If you are giving the 100 times, this particular loop will repeat. If you are giving the 10 times only, the loop is going to repeat. So we don't want to modify the information inside this particular for loops. Only we are going to modify in the size here. Based on our requirement here, we are going to change the size. Getting the pen. So this is important here. Okay, now if you observe what we are doing here, we are trying to run 45 times here. Now you can see. So 0 to this is the some bigger value. So it's starting with 0. Now it is ended with 88. If you calculate this, so it's going to contain 45. The size is 45, but indexes are going to start with 0 and it is ended with 44 only. Okay, so this is important here. This is, we'll call it as a dynamic array initialization. The size we are creating dynamically, and dynamically we are inserting the values here. So here we don't have any static conditions here. Okay, this is important here because we are going to use the same example one more time. So there we are going to come up with one more example here. So the example basically, why instead of using this particular stack is full, so what we will do, we are going to come up with a dynamic size creation internally only. Dynamic size creation internally only. The example basically, so here we are giving the 10 size, but here this particular loop will repeat around 40 times. Whenever this particular loop will repeat 40 times, we are trying to come out of the size. Whenever we are trying to come out of this particular size, what we need to create a bigger array. Getting the point? We need to create some bigger array, and the bigger array will insert the values here. Okay, those example we'll see in our upcoming classes. Now I'm trying to move into the nested and inner classes example. Nested and inner class example. Okay, so let's observe how we can use this particular example. So basically, here what we need to understand this particular nested and inner class example, and so it is possible to define one class within the another class here. Right now we are trying to discuss only one class here. We did not come up with a one class inside the another class here. So today we are going to discuss about the important information. So how we can create a one class within the another class here. Okay. So these particular classes we are going to call it as a nested classes here. And here the important things what we need to understand here, scope here. So whatever the scope of this nested class is, it's going to bundled with the outer class, because the nested classes we are going to create inside the outer class only. Getting the point? So this is very important here. Basically, if you observe carefully, we have a one class here, something like class here. Class A I'm trying to create here, and inside this particular class here, I'm going to use class B. This particular class B is going to have the scope of this particular class A only. Getting the point? Within the class A only, we can access this particular class B related information. So this is, we'll call it as the scope of this particular nested class here. Getting the point? And here we are having two types of nested classes. This is important. One is a static nested class and another one is a non-static. The non-static nested classes we are going to call it as a inner classes. Getting the point? So just now, like in the last example, we discussed about the static behavior, like static variable, static method, static block. Getting the point? So same way, we are having static nested classes. Getting the point? And non-static nested classes. This is very important. We need to understand here. Getting the point? This is very important. We need to understand here. Okay. So observe carefully how we can come up with a simple example. So here I'm going to create a one class here. Something like I'm going to create outer class. And this particular outer class contains outer x value. Okay. And this is the one variable I'm trying to initializing, that is called outer x 100. And I'm trying to use a one method called test method. And this particular test method, internally, I'm going to create an object here. So which object I'm going to create? The inner class. Here I'm trying to come up with one more class here. This is the inner class we are trying to create. And now observe, here I'm trying to create a one method called display. Void display. So just I'm trying to print the outer x value here. Outer x. Okay. But how we are going to call this particular display method? So how we are going to call? Basically, I'm going to create an object here. Now observe. So what we are doing here? This is the inner class. Basically, if you see, this particular scope here is open with the line number 9 and it is ended with line number 13 here. But now what I am doing here, I am able to access the outer class information. Whatever the outer class information we are having here, I am able to access the outer class information here. So this is very important here. Because of that only I am explaining, whatever the inner class we are creating, the inner class is bounded with our outer class here. Okay, so if I'm going to make the private variable, what happens here? So for example, private here. Now you can see any error here? Nothing. Because we are inside the same class only. But the variable where we are creating, the variable we are creating this outside like outer class level, but we are trying to access the same variable in the inner classes here. Even though if it is a private variable, happily we are able to access this information. Okay, now observe carefully. But now what I am trying to do, how we are going to come up with object creation here. So this is only the same class I am going to use. And outer class I am trying to create OU dot. What is the method we are having? Test method. So this test method internally, what is doing it? It is trying to create a inner class object and it is calling the display method. Now you can see. So this is the display method is called here, and whatever the value we initialize here, the particular value is printing here. But even though, what we need to understand here basically, the value we define outside, the value we define outside of this particular inner class. So happily we are able to access this information here. Okay, so now So this is the one important example we need to understand. And one more important information. Now what I'm trying to explain here. So observe carefully. This is the one more information. Where is the outer class? Here I'm not going to create any information, or we can remove this. I'm going to comment out this. But what is the best way to call the display method now? See, I don't want to create an object of this particular inner class inside this particular test method. Getting the point? So I want to come up with another solution here. So now observe what is the best way to call this example. And now what I'm doing here? So what I'm doing, one is the outer class, and we created with one inner class. Inside the inner class, we are having display method. The display method is trying to print the outer x value. Okay. Now observe. Here what we are doing here, we are trying to create an outer object. So once we create an outer object, with the help of this particular outer object, I'm using the dot, using this particular dot. Why we need to use this particular dot? So it's going to combine the outer class and the inner class here. Inner class I'm calling. Getting the point? Here I'm trying to call inner class. So if you observe carefully, first I'm trying to create outer object here, and with the help of this particular outer object here, I'm trying to create a inner object. And here the type here. So whatever the object we are creating, so it is not matching with this particular type, because here we are creating the inner object, not the outer object. But if I want to create an inner class object, first we need to create an outer class object. Getting the point? Because the inner class is bounded within the outer class. Okay. Now outer dot we can make as a inner. Outer dot inner. Now observe carefully. Here we don't have a test method. What is the method we are having here? Display method. Directly we can call this particular display method here. Now you can see whatever the value we printed earlier, the same value we are printing. Getting the point? So this is the another important information here. So earlier what we did here, basically we come up with a one method called test method, and inside the test we created an object and we call here. But right now what we are doing here? So right now, so directly we are creating an inner class object here. So this is the way we need to create an inner class object here, because it is not a static class here, because it is a non-static class here. So this is the way we need to come up with the creation of the inner class objects here. Okay, so any questions on this?
So what is the use of this inner class? Because without inner class, we can easily call the method. If we write all the method in the outer class, and we can call that.
Yeah, that we can do, but problem here, so for specific purposes here. So this inner classes section, most of the time we are going to use the design patterns related examples here. Getting the point? So whenever we are trying to define something like one more class within the another class, so this we need to follow the way of creation objects here. So everything sometimes we cannot create in the outside class here. So sometimes here we are going to provide some information inside this particular inner classes as well, because it is a one restrictions here. If we want to access this information, now what we are doing is we are creating the outer object, and later we are creating the inner class, and later we are calling this particular display method. So this is the some security we are making here. Directly we don't have access to access this particular the display method here.
Okay. So can we create any? Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, you can go ahead. Actually, I just want to add a point. After you're done, I will continue.
Okay. Can we create any variable in the inner class also, or only just in outer class?
We can create.
Or if in inner class we can create variable like private, so can we access in the outer class?
So again we need to check the scope here.
scope is same in the outer, like inner class is in the outer class scope.
So wrong, right?
Oh
If you
no, so
observe
it's not.
carefully,
Yeah, it's not.
something like I value, I'm trying to initialize the int a is equals to 200.
Mm-hmm.
So just I'm copying this, and here I'm trying to print. Okay, directly we cannot use. What I will do, I will open this method. Now you can see whatever the a value we define, so it's giving me an error
It's out of scope.
because this is important. The wherever we are creating here, this is the inner class scope, and the outer class scope is here. So 16 to 3. This is we need to check
With the help of getter setter method, can we do?
how we are going to call.
I'm just asking a question. Can we do
Yeah,
this?
that is fine. So for example, here I created so display method. For example, this is the one setter method, or you can think this is the one getter method. But how we are going to call this display method outside of this inner class? If I want to call this display method, we need to create an object.
Mm.
Okay, so how we are going to create an object? If it is an outer class, so for example, inside this outer class, directly we can create an outer class. We cannot call this display method because this display method is available inside this particular class. Getting the point. So okay, observe carefully. Here I'm trying to come up with a value. So let's see. I generated here. Set a and get here. Okay. Now question here. If we want to access this, the setter method, what we need basically? We need an object. Which class object we need? Inner class. Why we need inner class? Because the methods are defined inside the inner class only.
Mm.
Okay. So how we are going to create inner class? So with the help of this outer class. Outer class dot inner class dot, we can call the set method or get method. So this information we cannot create outside of this particular inner class here. This is the again specific methods to this outer class, but the a variable we define line number 15. Again, if you see, so these two locations we are getting an error. We cannot create a method like this. The a variable it is not able to find.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so this is important here. Basically, whenever we are trying to create any object here, like the particular class, variable, and method, we need to check out the scope here. So where the like when this particular line number it is open and when it is closed, that is important here. So within that only we can come up with the objects and we can create the objects and we can call the appropriate method here. But only the way when we are having two classes here. When we are having the two classes, but if you're trying to access the inner class property, so this is an order we need to follow. Outer dot, inner dot, something. Okay. So this is
Okay.
important here.
Sir, I have one doubt.
Okay.
Apart from the security, and are we doing this in order to reduce the number of objects creation? Like if we don't use this nested class like outer dot inner, again we need to create inner object, and earlier what you have shown, we need to create two objects, right?
So here also
To
we are doing the
reduce.
same. See, to reduce the object information, we cannot use the non-static. We can come up with a static. So that's the way we can reduce the objects.
So is this static or non-static
It is a
kind of?
non-static only. Where we are using the static here?
Okay, okay. Yeah, non-static. So to reduce the number of object creation, we are using this concept, right?
No, it is not like that. So because if you see, first outer object we are creating here, and the inner object we are creating. So the you can see the new operator here. So it's going to create a new objects here.
But with the same name, OU.
Yes, yes,
Okay. So to reduce the number of lines also, we can use this type of thing. Right?
yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
So sir, here one object for the both class.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, how many classes we can do like this, sir? Like
You can create as
here
many.
we have, oh,
See,
like outer dot, inner dot, some other number of classes
no, no, no.
also we
Yeah,
can
you
do.
can create inside the inner. You can come up with a one more inner. That is no problem. But if you want to create a one more class, so this is an order. So you can copy and paste it here, line number 15. The class maybe it's a different, but the path here outer dot something inner, outer dot inner one, outer dot inner to something. But if you want to create one more inside this particular inner class, again the path is same, outer dot again inner one or inner to something, whatever we are going to provide.
In the same order. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So now we'll go to the one more example here. So not only this way we can create an object here. So that is the another important. We can come up with a so loop something anything. We can create a method and you can come up with a one loop if you want to create a multiple objects. So you can define the inside the loop. For example, here this is the test method I'm using right now. And what I will do, this is the one loop I'm trying to create. Inside this particular loop, now what I will do, the entire class I'm trying to make here. Okay, so entire class I'm trying to create here. And whenever I'm trying to create, now observe carefully. So where we can create the scope here, the scope within the for loop only. Within the for loop only, we need to create like this. If you are trying to create outside of this particular for loop, now just now we identified we are getting an error here. Getting the point. This is important. Now if you see, so inside the test method, we are creating one loop. Inside the loop, we are coming with a class here. How many times this particular loop is created, the same way this particular classes are going to create here. Okay, and here for each iteration we are trying to create an object, we are calling this particular method. And observe, so we don't want to create this particular inner here because we are not calling the inner related information directly, we are calling the outer information. So inside the outer only, we are trying to declaring the class and we are trying to create an object. Now if you see how many times this particular display method is called, 10 times. Why it is calling 10 times here? Because we are creating a class inside the loop here. So this is also possible here. Okay. So in the not only this particular method, you can come up with a block, you can come up with a different informations. Wherever it's required the class, you can create here.
Sir,
Okay.
are we
So
creating 10 objects here? Like
yes, we
we
are
kept
creating a
in
10 objects here.
okay.
So this is the path. So inside the scope of this particular loop only we are creating an object here.
Sir, after for loop, once for loop fails only, it will come to the next line, right, sir?
Yes. So whenever the condition fail only, it will come out of this particular line number 50.
So in that case, then only one inner object will be there, right?
See, the path is here. The line number 6 is open and the line number 15 is closed here. So you can see it is highlighting here. Whenever I'm trying to click here, the cursor, so it's providing the scope here. It's open here, it's closed here. So within this for loop only, I'm defining. For example, if I'm defining outside, see here, we are getting an error.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm trying to check with another example. Okay. So we identify the non-static example. Now we'll come up with a static related example. So same example I'm going to use here inside the outer, but what I will do, I will change this. Outer class is same. So private static void, something like outer method. Okay, so this is an outer method I'm defining, and so simple method. The simple message I'm trying to define, and here the class I'm trying to create. Static class inner. So inside this particular inner class, I'm trying to come up with a public method. So why I'm using this particular public method? Any idea why I'm using this particular public method here?
In order to use in another class.
So basically, this method is going to call from the outside of this particular class. Okay, so once we call this outer method, sorry, the message, now I'm calling outer method. So how we can call? What is the way to we can call the outer method? Any idea?
We create an object.
So it's required the object here.
No, sir. It doesn't need object creation if we define it as a static.
No,
Okay,
you can.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So outer and direct we can call.
Okay, so if you see what we are doing here, we are creating one outer class and we have one private method, and it is a static method as well. And we come up with a one static inner class, and we have a one public method. Inside the public method, I'm calling the private, whatever the private method we are having here. But how we are going to create an object here? How we are going to create an object here? So this is important here, because here it is, so inner is a static here. Outer is a non-static. Getting the point? This is important here. So let me come up with this. A new outer. Outer is a non-static object here. And here, now what I'm doing here? I'm trying to create an inner here. Outer dot inner. So now what I'm doing here, I'm going to call the constructor, and this will return the inner type. Right. So once we define this, new outer, remove this. Observe carefully. So how we are creating this particular objects here? Because outer is a non-static here, so we need to come up with a object creation, and inner is a static here. And here I'm not using any new operator here. So see the difference example and the previous example with the current example. So earlier we created the two objects here, new outer dot, new inner dot something. But here if you see, for the inner class, inner is the static class we created, and how we are creating an object here, new outer dot inner. Directly we are calling the class name here. So it's going to call the default constructor, and it will return the inner class objects here. And finally, we are trying to call this particular display method. Now you can see inside this particular inner class method and inside the outer method. So these are all the printer method we defined here. Hitting the pen. So first it is calling the inside the display class method, and later it is moving into the private method which we define inside the outer class here.
Sir, regarding the method, we declare it as private, right? So even though are we able to access from other class, because private it is only
See,
stored
that is
in
a
that
big
one.
question. So if you observe carefully, first we are calling the display method. Okay. So from the display method it is calling, not from the outside of class. See, directly we are not calling the outer method here. First we are calling the display method. So whenever we are calling this display method, if you see, this is the way we can call here. This is the public display method we are calling, and internally we are calling the line number 10. Internally we are calling this particular private method here.
Okay. Yeah. From inner, we are accessing that outer method, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is important basically. From inner class, you can access the outside of this particular outer class related information. But the problem, from the outer class, you cannot access the inner properties. Okay, inner to outer we can access. From outer to inner we cannot access here. This is important. So you cannot specify the inner class properties or inner class information outside of the inner class. But the outside of information we can call or we can access inside the inner class, because the inner class is bounded within the outer class scope only. That is the main reason here we are going to create these particular nested classes here. Okay, so this is the way we can come up with the static related information here. So now we identified the inner classes as well as the nested classes here.
So the difference between the static and non-static is, if we define it as a static, we don't need to create an object for that inner class.
Yes,
That is the only difference, right?
yes. But here the
Remaining all.
information, yeah, remaining all are same. They are calling the methods and initializing everything is same.
Suppose if inner class is private, then we cannot access, right?
Yes, so inner class is a private. Okay, let's do that also. Whenever I'm making this class as a private, now what happens here? So inside the, like outside of this particular, the outer class, this inner cannot identify. Okay, even if I'm going to open like this, see the errors here. The outer is dot, inner is not visible. Okay, this inner we cannot call from the outside.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so let me come up with one more example. So basically, okay, super class related, right now we don't have an option. Okay, I think these are all the enough information. So I'm trying to think one more example on this. So test object and test object dot outer one. Okay, so this is the one way to create a one more object. So now what I'm doing here, I'm going to remove this one outer class I'm creating here, and inside this particular outer class again private variable, something like int data, some value I'm giving, and here I'm going to come up with a inner class. So void message method I'm defining, and inside this, so simple one data is whatever the data we define outside like a outer class, I'm printing inside this inner class. Okay, now so the same object I want to create here. So how I'm going to create here? So first what I will do, outer object I'm going to create. So OU new, this is the another way to create an outer object. OU dot, now what I'm doing is I'm going to create a new inner object. Okay, and here if I'm going to specify what happens here, getting the point, inner in. So this is the one more way to define here, outer dot inner also. So if I'm not specifying outer dot inner, so we are not getting any error. Why we are not getting any error? Any idea? Getting the point. This is important. If you see here, I'm creating only outer objects with the help of this particular outer reference OU dot new inner. So this is the another way to create an object OU dot new inner object. But this particular inner directly I'm specifying the inner. But basically, what is the path here? The inner is available outer dot inner. This is the original path basically. Right. But now, even I'm trying to remove this outer dot inner, we are not getting any error. Why? Because here we are having the outer class path here, OU. Carrying the point. Because of this, we are not getting any error here. That is we need to understand carefully. Okay. So this is the one way to create.
Sir, are we using the object to create one more object, right?
Yes. So just we are giving, like we are sharing the information to compiler. So this is the outer class object reference here. So using this object references, try to create a one more object that is a inner class. So then we are going to have references here. The path is going to have with two objects here. Okay. So this is the one way to create this particular outer class related, sorry, the nested classes related information here.
So which way we'll be using more in our projects, sir? Like
That is basically it's going to depends on the application. See, if you want to use the common related information, so there we are going to use the static related information. Okay, if we want to come up with the specific things, so we are going to use the non-static here. So that we need to understand. So the whatever the code we are going to implement, the code is it's going to reusable for the multiple locations. Then we can go for the static here. So directly the static how we are going to call with help of the name of the class, and we are going to call the the method name directly. So there we are not going to create any objects. But the problem, whenever we are having the specific one, so for the specific one here, we are not going to use the static, and we can come up with a non-static, and we'll create an object, and with help of the object, the methods we are going to call here. Okay, so this is important things we need to understand regarding this particular nested classes as well as the inner classes sections here. Okay, so now this is we completed the nested classes, and most probably tomorrow we are going to discuss the command line argument, because we already identify the command line arguments here, and one of the another important topics called varr concepts. So this is important here, because this the whatever the varr concept we are going to discuss tomorrow, it is introduced in the Java 1.5 onwards here. So first we'll discuss about the varr concept here, and once we are familiar with the varr concept here, we'll try to identify the inheritance here. So this is the one of the OOPS principle. The first one we completed, that is called encapsulation. Now tomorrow most probably we are going to discuss about the inheritance here. Okay, so this is all about the today's session. We'll continue tomorrow. So
One last doubt, sir. So most common used methods or classes, we will define it as static. The rare one, if we are not using only for particular cases, that we will use as non-static. Am I right, sir?
yes, it's correct.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions regarding about today's session?
Sir, if possible, can you give any exam, like any program question, so that we will come up with tomorrow if we have any doubt?
Right now, so basically just focus on the what we are discussing, the core Java. So once we complete the core Java, because in the spring we will try to define the multiple example under this particular static related and non-static related.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.